In 3 seconds from saving the king, I decided he should remember exactly who put the crown on his head. The glass of the International Press Hall hummed with lights and nerves. Cameras blinked like insects. The city sprawled beyond the wall of windows, steel veins, bright arteries, while inside the air smelled of chilled water, electrical heat, and the faintest thread of alpha restraint. Colt Harrow stood at the podium, every edge of him pressed and precise. He didn't fidget. He didn't clear his throat. He simply existed like a verdict. I was supposed to stand behind him and take notes. Instead, when the journalist in the front row rose, a woman with a silver pen and a smile that said she was paid to bruise, my hand moved first. "Mr. Harrow," she began, and the cameras leaned in. "Isn't it true? The success of the Accords depends on appeasing certain appetites? How can an Alpha CEO claim ethical leadership while keeping an Omega on a leash at his side?" Ah, so we were starting with blood. Colt's gaze narrowed a millimeter. 1,000 microcalculations clicked behind those steel gray eyes. I didn't plan to interrupt. I do prefer planning. But the room tilted toward spectacle, and my job, unofficially always, was to steer the ship away from cliffs. I stepped into the line of microphones and smiled like a scalpel. "Thank you for the question," I said, keeping my tone air-conditioned and friendly. "A clarification. Ethics don't belong to appetites. They belong to reason. The Accords are a framework that protects all parties, human and werewolf, precisely from the misuse of power. Any narrative that reduces people to their biology is not just lazy, it's dangerous." The silver pen paused. The journalist blinked. Somewhere behind me, Colt didn't move. That meant I still had my job. For now. Another hand shot up. "So you're admitting you're his Omega?" "I'm admitting I'm his executive assistant," I replied, making sure the words clipped clean, "and today I'm the company's appointed voice for the Accords. My designation, like anyone's, is not a leash. It's one aspect of a person with a job, boundaries, and a contract with clauses I wrote myself." A murmur rolled across the hall. The long lenses gulped me down. "Are you saying," a man from the back said, "that the Accords will regulate bonds between Alphas and Omegas in corporations?" "We're saying the Accords will codify consent," I said. "Bonds without consent are chains. Bonds with consent are agreements. Agreements are governed. That's called civilization." Someone coughed. Someone hissed. Someone laughed too loudly to be accidental. Behind me, Colt shifted half a step closer. Not touching. Just close enough that the tempered glass scent of him sharpened. Cold metal and a clean citrus note he never purchased in a bottle. Restraint smelled like that on him. I finished with what would become a regrettable soundbite. "If you need a crown to speak, fine. Today, I'm holding it so the king can address his court without losing his head." Half the room gasped. The other half lifted phones. "Mr. Harrow," the first woman tried again, recovering. "Does your assistant just—" "Thank you," Colt said, voice even. "My assistant will conclude the briefing. I'll address questions at the Accords panel this afternoon." He ceded the podium without looking at me. I didn't glance at him either. We're professionals. We pretend. I took 3 more questions, each an attempt to wedge me open. I gave them clean answers and nothing to grip. When the red lights blinked off, the hall exhaled in a single paper shuffle sigh. Security drifted forward like well-tailored shadows. I handed the moderator my notes. Colt said nothing as we stepped into the corridor. Cameras prohibited, the quiet too well appointed to be comfortable. The marble floor reflected us. One tall Alpha in a charcoal suit like a winter sky. One impeccably forgettable Omega in navy with a tie-knotted thumbprint of silver. My thumbprint. He let the door close behind us with the softest click. Then his gaze cut to me. "You crossed a line," Colt said. "I drew it," I replied. He studied my face as if we had all the time in the world. I kept my shoulders loose and my breathing steady, the way you do when an apex predator stands within arm's reach, and the only thing between you and his teeth is your composure. "You redirected a question addressed to me," he said. "They baited a headline that would have cost us the next round," I said. I chose a different headline. "The crown," he said, flat as glass. "Yes," I said pleasantly. I polished it before handing it back. "Consider invoicing me for the cloth." A fraction of something like surprise moved under his control. Maybe. Hard to say with Colt. He wore discipline the way others wore cologne. "You don't speak for me without permission." "Then next time," I said, "give me permission in advance." We stared at each other, the corridor humming with temperature-controlled air and unvoiced things. The faint vibration of the building's bones traveled through my soles. Outside the windows, the city tilted its face to the late morning and waited for our story. It would not wait kindly. He stepped closer, not quite invading my space, just bisecting it. "You enjoy risks." "I enjoy outcomes," I said. "And I don't gamble. I hedge." His eyes flicked to my mouth and back with the clinical appraisal of a man who counted seconds, because seconds were money. "You like the microphone too much." "I like clear policy too much," I said. "The microphone is simply where policy gets dressed." Silence. The elevator down the hall dinged, and no one moved to enter it. "What you said about consent," he said at last, "was that for me or for the room?" "For the world," I said. Then, because I'm honest even when it gets me fired, "and a little for you." The steel softened. Not warm, Colt didn't warm, but edged less like a scalpel, more like a key. He nodded, a judgment reserved. "There will be a panel at 4, he said. "You'll lead it. Legal will send your talking points by 2. You will stick to them." "Of course," I said. "And if they're insufficiently sharp, I'll sharpen them." "That," he said, "is the part I'm trying to control." "Try harder," I said, softly enough he could decide whether I'd meant him to hear it. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He did something worse. He paused, as if tasting the balance of the moment, and let it pass. "You'll ride with me to the panel," he said, stepping back. "We'll rehearse in the car." "Very regal," I said. "Don't," he replied. And there was the slightest cracking line in the ice. Fatigue, maybe. Or the awareness that the city already called him His Majesty, and denying it wouldn't stop the halls from bowing when he entered. I pivoted to go and nearly collided with Leon Carter, head of security, who had the reflexes of a wolf and the patience of a saint, burdened with our entire company. His gaze slid past me to Colt, reading the air the way alphas do. "Clear," Leon said. "Press is contained." Voss's team loitered, but we redirected. Mara Voss, the rival CEO who smiled like an apology and spoke like a contract. I filed the information under things that will bloom into problems by sundown. "Thank you," Colt said. Leon's jaw flexed. His eyes flicked to me with something like reluctant respect. "Nice save," he said under his breath. "I didn't save him," I said. "I saved the Accords." Leon's mouth might have twitched. Same difference today. He moved on. I turned back to Colt, who was already walking, expecting the world to fall into step. It usually did. I did not immediately. "Mr. Harrow," I said. He stopped. The full weight of his attention is a physical thing. You feel it press your collarbones, measure your pulse, chart your exits. "You hired me to anticipate problems," I said. "One more for your list. Voss will come for me, not for you. She'll try to make me her headline. If she succeeds, we lose control of the narrative, and the Accords go from framework to battleground." "I'm aware," he said. "Then draft a plan that acknowledges I'm not a leash," I said, and gently. Because the line needed drawing in ink now, not pencil. "I'm a partner, or I'm gone." There, out loud, my own pulse stepped off a curb and kept walking. His eyes cooled to their baseline. "You don't make ultimatums in my corridor." "Then invite me into your office," I said. "I'll make them there." A long breath threaded through his nose. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man standing inside a blast radius, calculating if the cost of the debris was worth the clarity of the explosion. 4 o'clock, he said finally. "Car at 3:30. Understood." I turned away before I could enjoy the shape of the victory. It wasn't a victory yet. It was only a drawn line on a spotless floor, asking to be honored. The door opened on the hum of the building, the city, the day. Somewhere outside this glass, headlines were grafting themselves to our names. Somewhere, Maravas was already writing a script in which I played the protagonist of my own downfall. Fine, let her write. I write better. The city at night pressed its neon face against Colt Harrow's windows, all teeth and promise. His office perched above it like a glass blade. The door clicked shut behind me. The hush inside felt engineered, the kind of quiet that cost money to maintain. He stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets, looking out over the grid of lights. The bar cart a few feet away held 2 crystal tumblers and a carafe that caught the skyline in its facets. This was not a place for warmth. This was where deals were stripped to bone and signed with whatever was left. "Mr. Harrow," I said. "Raiden." He did not turn at first. Then he did, in one measured pivot, as if the city itself had rotated to face me through him. The steel of his gaze was intact. The edges of him were sharper for the hour. "Sit." I didn't. He noticed. He let it slide, which meant he was here for outcomes, not posture. "The board wants stability," he said, moving to the cart. "Investors want clarity. The public wants a story that ends with the world not burning down in litigation." 3 different gods, I said. All of them hungry. He poured 2 fingers into each tumbler. Glass chimed, 1 clear note, small and cold. He handed me a drink, not to be polite, but to control the variables. It was smoky, disciplined, like something that had been taught how to behave. "You'll be my representative at the Accords," he said. "No ramp-up, no prelude. Publicly and privately. You'll lead, you'll speak, and you'll make the necessary concessions when I tell you." We looked at each other over the lip of our glasses. The city glowed around us like a conspiracy. "Congratulations," I said lightly. "You've just promoted your assistant into a liability you can't tame." "You mistake discipline for domestication," he said. "And you mistake competence for obedience." His mouth didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. He set his tumbler down with surgical precision. "Let's be clear," he said. "You're mine or you walk." The sentence landed with the weight of a signature. The air tightened. I took a sip to keep from laughing, because laughter would have been a weapon, and I prefer to keep those sheathed until aim is perfect. I stepped closer, enough to taste the temperature of him. People talk about alpha scent like it's thunder. Colt's scent was winter in steel, clean, restrained, with a blade-thin citrus note. And under it, tonight, something small and unsteady. Not fear. The preface to it, vigilance, stretched thin. He doesn't want to mark me, I thought. He wants to own without saying the word. But I am not a display. "I'm a partner," I said, soft and exact, "or I walk." The tumblers didn't clink this time. The silence did. He could have pressed. He didn't. He took 1 step, not forward or back, but into the same air. "You want parity. I want terms," I said. "Parity is a byproduct. You'll have talking points. Legal has prepared them. I'll draft my own. Legal can bless them after I sharpen the edges. You'll coordinate with PR. I'll coordinate with PR, and PR will coordinate with reality. You'll clear every deviation with me. I'll clear every deviation with you if you answer when I call." Raiden. My name in his mouth was too calm for the voltage between us. "We're not play acting. We're moving a market. If you go off script and the market flinches—" "If the script is a corpse," I said, "the market will smell it." He stared a beat too long. The skyline flickered against his lapel like static. "You like knives," he said. "I like surgery," I said. "Knives are a means." He moved past me to the desk. A folder waited, edges aligned with the grain of the wood. He opened it and rotated it toward me. Schedule, media grid, list of counterparties, a column of red flags. I'd annotated half these names already in my head. "You'll be the face," he said. "You'll take the questions meant to bruise me, and you'll smile when you do it." "I already did," I said. And we both kept our blood. His eyes cut to mine, the faintest thing. Approval? Irritation? Crossed. His features, and self-erased. "The rival will come for you." "Maravas has already sent flowers," I said. "And a card that smells like ownership." His jaw tightened once, a pulse under skin. You met her? Not yet. I can smell intent through paper. He let that sit. She'll offer you freedom. In a gold frame, I said. With a lock disguised as a hinge. We stood on either side of the desk like litigants who'd given up on the judge and decided to tell the truth. He folded his arms, not defensive, containing. Why do you want this? He asked. It was not the question I expected. It was worse. It was honest. Because the Accords are a once-in-a-decade chance to write a rulebook that chooses consent over appetite, I said. Because I'm good at reading rooms and better at rewriting them. Because if an Omega does this well, someone younger watches and learns it can be done. You want a legacy. I want a precedent, I said. Legacies take care of themselves if the precedent is clean. He was quiet. The city hummed like a live wire under glass. I could feel him measuring me again, not the way men measure bodies, but the way generals measure terrain. Finally, he nodded once, a verdict rendered aloud. You'll have provisional authority. You'll write your talking points. You'll negotiate within the parameters I set. Deviations require my assent. Define deviation, I said. You'll know it when you feel the floor tilt, he said. Call me before you jump. And if the floor falls without warning, then you were already falling, he said. And we fix it together. Together. The word didn't fit easily in his voice. It sounded imported. It sounded like he wanted to send it back and keep it, both. I let out a breath I hadn't agreed to hold. I'll need direct access to legal, PR, and security. And to you have it, he said. In writing, his mouth almost curved. My word is the writing. I prefer paper. It photographs better. He pulled a sheet from the folder, signed with a pen heavy enough to double as a threat, and slid it across. Authority, access, scope. Provisional, yes, but explicit. I read every line because I always read every line. Then I took his pen and signed the acknowledgement with my own crisp, unflourished hand. The crystal on the cart caught a car's distant red blink and set it bleeding across the desk for 1 second, then nothing. He capped the pen. We didn't toast. The glasses stood where we'd left them, cold and useful. Anything else? He asked. Yes, I said. When you say you're mine or you walk in my direction again, be sure you're talking about outcomes, not people. A winter pause. Duly noted, he said. It wasn't an apology. It was better. A correction entered into the record. I turned to go. His scent shifted. Still steel, still citrus, still controlled. But the thread of vigilance loosened half a knot, as if the room had agreed to share its air instead of rationing it. At the door he said, Raiden. I looked back. You'll make enemies, he said. I make outcomes, I said, and opened the glass. Enemies, volunteer. The corridor's light washed over the threshold like applause withheld. I stepped into it with the signed authority in my hand, and the city staring up, already hungry for the next line. The morning after the appointment, the company's atrium transformed into a press coliseum. Rows of glossy chairs, drones hovering like metallic hornets, the corporate banner gleaming across glass walls. Reporters swarmed, smelling blood and novelty. The headline had already written itself in their eyes. Omega takes the stage. I stood at the podium with the logo behind me, and Colt Harrow 2 paces to my right, his stillness more dangerous than movement. Cameras blinked. The city outside pulsed in reflection, a second audience waiting to feast. Good morning, I began, smiling like I'd already read every question they planned to ask. On behalf of Harrow Industries, I'll clarify the principles behind the upcoming Human Accords. A hand shot up before I'd finished. Mr. Winters, are you here because the Alpha CEO finds it politically convenient to present a, how should I put it, softer face of leadership? I glanced at Colt. He didn't twitch. I took that as a green light. I'm here because clarity isn't softness, I said. It's strength articulated. Laughter rippled, quick and nervous. Another reporter stood. So, you deny being Mr. Harrow's bond partner? Correct, I said pleasantly. The only bonds discussed today are contractual, mutual, and notarized. Click, click, click. Cameras devoured us. Then came the real strike. But surely, a man in the second row said, ethical oversight in werewolf corporations can't exist when instincts drive leadership. Can it? Perfect setup. I leaned in slightly, voice even. Ethics, I said, do not belong to instincts. They belong to reason. And reason, thankfully, doesn't shift with the moon. Silence. Then the room exhaled in laughter, some reluctant, some impressed. A dozen pens scribbled. One reporter mouthed, "Good line." Behind me, Colt's presence flared, controlled but taut. I didn't have to turn to feel his irritation. He hated losing narrative control, even to success, especially to success. I continued smoothly. The Accords exist to balance autonomy and accountability across all designations. It's not about suppressing instinct, it's about civilizing power. A question from the back. So you're saying alphas need regulation? I'm saying everyone does, I said. Power, in any form, requires boundaries. That's what keeps it from devouring itself. 100 flashes fired. Somewhere PR executives wept with joy. When the briefing ended, the moderator thanked the room. I could almost feel the media tide shifting. The Omega face of reason, the quote that would headline, "Ethics belong to reason." The crowd loved it. Investors would love it. And Colt Harrow, standing silent beside me, did not. In the corridor afterward, the soundproof door sealed the noise away like a confession booth. Colt walked ahead, jaw locked. His shadow stretched long in the glass floor. "Brilliant performance," he said without looking back. "The markets will adore you." "Happy to serve the bottom line," I said. "I recommend you check the social feeds before legal hyperventilates." "I already have," he said. Raiden for the Accords, trending in 4 languages. "You're welcome." He stopped, turned. "You turned a corporate initiative into a personality cult. I turned a negotiation into a movement. Movements last longer." His eyes hardened to frost. "You were supposed to support my narrative, not replace it." I smiled just enough to be irritating. "You hired me to make people listen. I can't control which of us they prefer to hear." For a heartbeat, the tension hung like glass, about to fracture. Then a new voice cut in. "Gentlemen," said Ellen Wynn, our head of PR, striding down the hall with a tablet in hand and a grin sharp enough to cut paper. "Before anyone murders anyone, may I say this? Raiden, you just bought us the best week of publicity in 5 years. Congratulations, we're saints again." Colt didn't move. Ella shifted her weight, sensing the ice. "And," she added, "the Ethics Bureau just retweeted your line, Raiden. That's unprecedented." I inclined my head. "Ethics likes to be flattered." Ella smirked. "Whatever you did, keep doing it. Just maybe warn His Majesty before dropping sound bites that reshape corporate law." Colt's glare could have sterilized steel. Ella took the hint and retreated, muttering something about champagne budgets. When she was gone, only Leon Carter remained at the end of the hall, arms crossed, unreadable. "Security Chief, Alpha, chronic observer of disasters in progress." "Nice job," Leon said dryly. "Half the staff thinks you just saved civilization. The other half thinks you're starting a coup. Why choose?" I said. Colt's gaze slid past me, to Leon. "Get the car ready. We're done here." Leon nodded, but before leaving, his eyes flicked to mine. There was respect there, quiet, begrudging, but also the kind of watchfulness, reserved for someone new to the inner ring of predators. When we were alone, Colt finally said, "Do you enjoy humiliating me in public?" "Humiliation is a strong word," I said. "You didn't look humiliated. You looked occupied." Occupied? With controlling the narrative. Which, if you haven't noticed, is already out there, multiplying like headlines in heat. His silence said enough. He hated it because it worked, because my words had stuck while his strategies still lived on paper. He moved closer, eyes narrowed. "You think charm substitutes for control. It doesn't." "I don't substitute," I said softly. "I supplement." That earned a muscle twitch near his temple. Colt's version of laughter, perhaps. "You're dangerously good at this. It's a survival trait." "Whose survival?" he asked, Yours. For now. By nightfall, the city looked different. News drones replayed my quote over footage of skyscrapers glowing under rain. My inbox overflowed, half congratulations, half caution. Back in my apartment, the silence was thick, almost reverent. I loosened my tie, watched the reflection of the skyline in the window. My phone buzzed, unlisted number. A delivery notification. I opened the door to find a bouquet taller than my desk. Deep crimson roses and black anemones, wrapped in silk the color of blood diluted with moonlight. No card, just a folded envelope wedged among the stems. Inside, in looping handwriting that smelled faintly of expensive perfume, "Every king needs an heir. Be mine. Mara Voss." I read it twice, once for the message, once for the intent. The scent was unmistakably alpha, assertive, honey-laced, engineered for conquest. The media storm had crowned me, and someone else was already plotting to steal the throne. The office at midnight was a held breath. One pool of light on my desk, the rest of the floor asleep, glass walls returning. My reflection in thinner and thinner copies until I looked like a rumor. Outside, the moon balanced on the lip of the skyline and poured white into the room. It found the ring of coffee I'd left on a legal memo. The stain gleamed like a small eclipse. I had been reading for hours, chasing a discomfort that wouldn't name itself. The latest draft of the Accords sat open on my screen. Version number, correct, formatting perfect, every clause wearing its Sunday best. And still, the text smelled wrong. Not literally, I kept the office scrubbed of sense, but wrong all the same, like the echo of a voice I didn't recognize speaking through ours. Clause 7.4, Emergency Protocols for Interdesignation Events. Harmless, at a glance. The sentence marched like all the others. But the punctuation, a comma where we always used a semicolon, an Oxford habit legal did not share, pricked like a splinter. I scrolled. The clause expanded, obedient and neat. A subpoint I had never approved allowed the executive committee temporary custodial oversight of Omega employees during declared emergencies in conformity with safety and performance criteria. It was a cage built from adverbs. A second splinter, the header font, a half point heavier. I pulled up our previous version and ran a compare. The differences hid like frost. Micro adjustments, not bold enough to flag red lines. Whoever had done this knew our house style well enough to impersonate it and not well enough to breathe in it. I traced the document's birth certificate. The metadata listed the original drafter, the revision time, the machine. All correct, all clean. Too clean. The audit trail felt scrubbed. "You smell it too," I murmured to the glass, and the glass returned my face with flat patience. If the clause reached daylight, every anti-Accords lobbyist would hold it up as proof we were codifying custodianship. We'd lose the room before we entered it. We'd lose me. I isolated the offending language, opened a secure channel to legal's night desk, and redlined it to oblivion. Then I wrote a replacement, a protocol requiring explicitly documented, voluntary consent for any temporary adjustments to work conditions. Reviewable by an independent ethics panel, with an appeal process that could wake a judge at 3 a.m. if necessary. If emergency meant urgency, then urgency needed witnesses. The cursor pulsed. Outside, a red aircraft beacon winked on the nearest tower like a heartbeat under glass. "Who handed you this, Mara?" I said to the moon, "and how much did you pay them to believe they were clever?" I was packaging the corrected draft for Colt when the room shifted temperature. Not colder, just more exact. "You work late," he said. I didn't jump. The trick with kings is to hear them coming even when they don't make a sound. "Only when someone tries to redecorate the prison," I said, eyes on my screen. Clause 704. "It's a leak." I heard him approach before I saw his reflection join mine. He stopped behind my shoulder, close enough that the tempered glass scent of him cut the room's stale midnight in two. Steel, restraint, the edge of citrus, tonight, threaded thinner, vigilance, and the kind of anger you cool before you drink. "Show me," he said. I pulled both versions side by side, pointed out the commas and the font weight, the way. The suspicious clause dovetailed with our existing sections as if it had always belonged. Colt didn't speak. He read with that surgical patience of his, absorbing before slicing. The metadata? He asked. Washed. Distribution? Contained, I said. Legal hasn't pushed it broadly, which is either luck or devotion to process. Source? He asked. Consultant access, I said. Tier 2, possibly contracted through procurement. Or someone in legal who likes Mara Voss's stationery. The moon cut into the window again, a perfect coin over his shoulder in the reflection. For one beat, our faces lined up in the glass, the king and the secretary, taught by the night to look like each other's shadows. Can you fix it quietly? He said. I did, I said, sliding the revision across the screen. Ethics panel, consent language, emergency review. It takes the teeth without taking the jaw. He read. His breath moved once, barely. I watched it ghost the glass and vanish. This will hold, he said at last. It will. He looked down at me. No, into the reflection of me, which is sometimes safer. You stopped an ambush. I stopped a sentence, I said. The ambush is tomorrow. His gaze lifted to my eyes in the glass. Thank you. The word struck like a pebble on a frozen lake, small, a long crack echoing out. You're welcome, I said, because it was the ordinary reply, and because ordinary felt like luxury at this hour. He straightened, the line of him returning to sculpture. Leon will trace the source. Trace it quietly, I said. If it looks like a purge, the press will smell blood and call it proof. That won't happen, he said. The steel in his voice was not volume. It was direction. And, Raiden, he added softer. Yes, don't. He stopped, revised. Be careful. It wasn't an order. It was a risk assessment that had found an inconvenient variable and, against policy, decided to value it. The gratitude hung in the air with a shadow behind it, something edged. And next time, he said, if you intend to rewrite my war in the middle of the night, wake me. Would you have come? Yes. For a second, I let myself believe him. It did not cost me much. Believing is cheaper than sleep. He circled the desk. The moon caught his cufflink, flared white, extinguished. This is what they wanted, he said, tapping the deleted sentence with a knuckle. A civilized chain. They forget chains gleam, I said. It makes them harder to see. And you see them. I've warned them, I said, before I could dress the sentence for company. He looked at me then, not like a CEO measuring an asset, but like a man who has finally located the thing that had been haunting the corner of his vision. Quiet. Not pity, not shock. Just a recognition I had not given him permission to have. I won't put one on you, he said. I know, I said. We stood in the island of light while the building slept, two stubborn silhouettes refusing to mirror each other too exactly. He picked up the corrected draft, signed the change authorization with that heavy pen that looked like a weapon, and slid it back to me. Implement, he said. Already did. The corner of his mouth threatened motion. It didn't get far. He put his hands in his pockets, as if to keep from reaching for something he wasn't allowed to touch. At 4, he said, meaning the panel, meaning the story we were still writing. You'll lead. I'll lead, I said, and you'll reign. His eyes answered with a warning that felt suspiciously like approval. Don't get used to my thanks. Don't give me reasons to need them, I said. He left without ceremony, the door closing with a hush that swallowed his reflection whole. The room stretched back around me, glass on glass on glass, returning only what I fed it. I saved the file, backed it up in 3 places the moon couldn't see, and finally let my shoulders drop. The coffee ring had dried into a perfect brown halo. I set my cup beside it, a smaller circle inside the larger, and watched the two reflect in the window until the city blurred. Trust is a crack that starts invisible. You only notice it when the light hits at the right angle, and you realize the glass has already chosen where it wants to split. The restaurant perched above the city like a crown, crystal walls, golden light, music soft enough to pretend it wasn't expensive. From the elevator, I could see the skyline stretch out like a pulse beneath us, steady and uncaring. Mara Voss was already there, waiting. Of course she was. She sat near the window, backlit by the city's reflection, the picture of composed temptation. Silk blouse, the color of spilled wine, hair coiled with surgical precision, a smile trained for kill range. "Raiden Winters," she said as I approached. Her voice carried the warmth of a hand offered across a chessboard. "I've been dying to meet the man who stole half my headlines this week." "Dying seems excessive," I said. "But I'll take the compliment." She gestured for me to sit. A server appeared, placed a drink before me without asking. Bourbon, neat. Colt's usual. I didn't touch it. "I didn't expect you to reach out personally," I said. Mara's lips curved. Some invitations can't be delegated. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Tell me, Raiden, do you enjoy working for Harrow?" "I enjoy working," I said. "Enjoyment isn't part of the contract." Her laughter was low, melodic. "He doesn't deserve you, you know. A man who can't decide whether to hide you or brand you. What a waste." There it was. The scent beneath her perfume, dominant, honeyed, reined in so tightly it felt like standing next to a thunderstorm behind glass. "I see the press loves your ethics," she continued. "Consent, equality, civilization, beautiful ideals. But ideals only matter when someone can enforce them." She slid a thin folder across the table. "I'm offering you that power. Inside, a proposed contract, Director of Interdesignation Affairs, Voss Dynamics. A new department, independent, autonomous, framed as a haven for omegas in leadership." On the surface, it gleamed. Under the first paragraph, it stank of design. "You'd have full authority," she said. "Budget, staff, legal immunity from alpha oversight. You could build something real. Free." "Free," I repeated, scanning the fine print. The clause jumped out almost politely, nestled between harmless legalese. "In matters of strategic representation, Director agrees to a personal synchronization protocol with the CEO of Voss Dynamics, as outlined in Appendix D." Appendix D, I already knew, would be a euphemism. A mark in digital form, a chemical handshake coded into the bloodstream, a leash dressed as policy. I closed the folder. "You're very generous." "Pragmatic," she corrected. "You and I both know omegas don't last long under alphas who think equality means a pat on the head. Harrow may be clever, but he's still playing king. I'm offering you your own crown." I met her gaze, all gleam and confidence. "You sell freedom beautifully," I said. "But it's still a cage. You just polish the bars." Something in her eyes flickered. Approval or amusement. "And yet, you came." "I was curious," I said. "You're the first person to try to recruit me with sincerity instead of threat." She lifted her glass, the liquid inside catching the light like captured fire. "Take the offer, Raiden. You'll be safer. You'll be seen." "I'm already seen," I said. "That's the problem." Her smile turned razor thin. "Then watch your back. Harrow's gratitude doesn't last. When you stop being useful, he'll forget you're human." I stood, leaving the untouched drink and the contract between us. "Then he'll have to remember." She tilted her head. "You sound loyal." "I sound independent," I said. "You should try it sometime." Her laughter followed me toward the elevator. Rich, predatory, amused. "You'll call me," she said, as the doors slid shut. "Everyone does. Eventually." The elevator descended through glass and shadow. I watched my reflection fracture against the night. A dozen versions of me, each holding a different choice. Freedom, loyalty, ambition, all interchangeable currencies when printed by the wrong hands. When I reached the street, the city air hit cold. I walked without destination, the scent of her perfume still clawing at the edges of my memory. Cloying, chemical, wrong. I thought of Colt, of the way his restraint filled a room without trying. His scent wasn't sugar or smoke. It was quiet, deliberate, contained. Steel that bent rather than snapped. He could be infuriating, but at least his chains were visible and negotiable. My phone buzzed. A message from Ella, trending again. #reason over instinct. "You're a storm, Raiden." I smiled without humor. Storms don't choose what they destroy. Above me, the skyscraper lights pulsed like heartbeat monitors for gods who never slept. Somewhere behind one of those windows, Mara Voss was already rewriting the board, plotting the next strike. I shoved my hands into my pockets and kept walking. Freedom in a golden frame was still a cage, and I had no intention of hanging it on my wall. The sun hadn't yet cleared the skyline, but Colt's office was already awake. Light bled through the tinted glass, turning everything the color of hesitation. The air smelled faintly of metal and rain, the kind of morning that never really decides whether to begin. He was waiting when I walked in, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows. A single file open on the desk, like a weapon disguised as paperwork. His eyes tracked me the way a sniper measures distance, calm, inevitable, unblinking. "Sit," he said. I didn't. "I assume this is about Voss," I said. His jaw flexed once. "You met with her." I listened. "You met." Listening doesn't require loyalty. It requires opportunity. His voice was soft, but the control beneath it made the floorboards listen too. "Do you think I wouldn't hear about it? You always hear about everything, Mr. Harrow." I used the formal tone deliberately. It sliced the air like a reprimand disguised as courtesy. "That's what makes you a terrifying boss and an impossible human being." He closed the file carefully, like someone shutting a coffin. "You could have told me." "And said what?" "By the way, your rival invited me to dinner to sell me the illusion of freedom. You would have fired me before dessert. I would have protected you." "From what?" I asked, finally meeting his eyes. "From autonomy?" The silence between us thickened. The sun reached the window, spilling light across the floor like a slow confession. Colt's hands stayed flat on the desk. "You don't understand the kind of people you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly," I said. "They just hide their collars better." His gaze darkened. "Don't turn this into poetry, Raiden. She wants to use you, and you don't?" The words came out before I could stop them. The moment they landed, the temperature dropped. Colt stood, slow, deliberate, every inch of him uncoiling like a decision. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." I stepped closer, refusing to flinch. "You think because you give me a title, you own the silence between my words. You think I'm a variable you can manage. But you don't know what it's like to be one." "To be what?" he asked. "An object." He blinked once, slow. "Then teach me." The room tilted. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The challenge wasn't shouted, it was whispered, threaded with something rawer than command. I wanted to say, "Don't tempt me." I wanted to say, "You couldn't handle the lesson." Instead, I stood there, every muscle drawn between retreat and surrender. "You don't want that lesson," I said quietly. "I want the truth," he said. "All I see is you balancing on that line like it's safety, when it's only exhaustion in disguise." "Maybe exhaustion is safer," I said. "At least it doesn't consume everything it touches." He moved around the desk, stopping close enough that the scent of him, steel, citrus, restraint, filled the oxygen. My pulse betrayed me. "You think I'm the monster," he said. "I think you don't know how to talk without issuing commands." He exhaled through his nose, something between anger and confession. "And you don't know how to listen unless there's a fight first." "That's because fights are honest," I said. We stood in the half-light, reflections merging and separating in the glass. The city outside was gold at the edges, as if the day itself were eavesdropping. "Did she touch you?" he asked. It wasn't jealousy. It was control disguised as concern. "No," I said. "She tried to." I declined. "Why?" "Because I don't accept collars, gold or otherwise." His eyes flicked to my throat. Not lascivious, just thoughtful, like he was studying absence. "She'll come again," he said. "They always do when they smell rebellion." "Then maybe rebellion needs better perfume," I said. He almost smiled, but it twisted halfway into something tired. "You're impossible." "I'm consistent," I said. "Which is worse?" "Probably." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The light shifted again, catching the sharp line of his cheek, the small scar just beneath his collar. He wasn't all marble. There were cracks under the polish, hairline and human. "You should know," I said finally, "the leak's contained. Clause 7.4 won't resurface." I cleaned it. "I read your revision," he said. "It's good." A pause, then quieter. Better than mine. That's why you hired me, I said. He looked down. That's why I can't replace you. The admission landed with the weight of something he hadn't meant to say aloud. For a heartbeat, the office wasn't a war zone. It was just a room with two people who didn't know how to stop fighting because peace meant honesty, and honesty was terrifying. I don't need protection, I said. Yes, he replied. You do, and you? He gave a faint, humorless laugh. I've never had it. That was when the silence turned dangerous. The kind of silence that hums between two live wires, waiting for contact. I could have stepped back. I should have. Instead, I felt myself lean forward just enough to feel his breath against my temple. Raiden, he said, my name landing like a warning, or a request, and then I stepped away first. His jaw clenched. The distance between us reasserted itself like a slammed door. Don't mistake proximity for permission, I said, though my voice wasn't as steady as I'd like. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. About what? About exhaustion being safer, he said. It's the only thing that doesn't lie. I exhaled, feeling something inside me crack, softly, quietly, without repair. He turned back to the window, the city finally awake beneath us. Go home, he said. Get some sleep. I almost told him I couldn't, that people like me didn't rest, we just changed battlegrounds. Instead, I straightened my tie. As I left, the first sunlight caught the glass and split it into fragments across the floor. For a moment I thought, he's not a beast. He just doesn't know any other language than command, and I wasn't sure which of us that condemned more. The negotiation headquarters looked like the inside of a heartbeat, screens, pulsing, servers humming, light bleeding blue through glass walls. It was close to midnight, the eve of the signing. The accords would go live at dawn. I was in the monitoring room, watching numbers breathe across data streams, when the first anomaly blinked into existence. A transfer timestamp, 3 minutes off from the others. A revision key. Unauthorized, but mirrored from my own. Someone was inside the system. Not tonight, I muttered, fingers already flying across the keyboard. The edits were subtle, surgical. They didn't delete, they replaced. The original file of the accords was being overwritten clause by clause, adjusted toward the same custodial language we'd already purged weeks ago. Clause 704 again. Always 7.4. I opened the access logs and saw the IP tag, a consulting firm under Voss Dynamics procurement umbrella. The same subcontractor who'd handled formatting for the early drafts. Clever. Predictable. Within minutes, I'd traced the path. External VPN, hidden credential piggybacked on one of our junior analysts' accounts. I cut the line, locked the entry, and encrypted every file with a triple key. The monitors calmed, their pulse returning to normal. Behind me, the door slid open with a sigh of air. Colt entered, coat thrown over his shoulders, tie undone, eyes bright with exhaustion and something far sharper. Report. Attempted overwrite, I said. I neutralized it. Voss's consultant was the vector. I've already sent the trace to security. His gaze flicked to the main screen, then back to me. Show me. I walked him through it. Timestamps, the code fingerprints, the altered clauses. His jaw tightened with each line. She won't stop, he said. She can't afford to. She's losing ground, I said. So she's playing desperate. He paced once, the sound of his shoes soft against the composite floor. What's the consultant's name? Darian Holt. Where is he? Still in the building, I said. Security has him in a holding office. Bring him to me, Colt said. The tone made the room smaller. No. He turned his head slowly, disbelief cutting through fatigue. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated. Leon's interrogating him now. If you walk in there, it becomes a spectacle. It becomes justice. It becomes a headline, I countered. And the only thing the public hates more than corruption is visible rage. He took a step closer. The lights caught in his eyes like blades. He sabotaged the accords. He could have destroyed everything we've built. Yes, I said. And that's why we don't give him the satisfaction of watching you break. I don't break, he said. Everyone breaks, I said quietly. It's just a question of audience. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was tight, vibrating, alive. The hum of the servers filled it like breath between arguments. He exhaled slowly. You think I'm about to lose control? I think you're about to prove her right, I said. His hand curled against the desk. You don't understand. I do. I met his gaze. I understand that instinct feels like power, that it promises relief, but you don't demonstrate strength when you break something, Colt. You demonstrate it when you choose not to. The words hung between us, fragile and unarmored. For once, he didn't fire back. He looked at me as if he was seeing something unfamiliar, a shape he couldn't categorize. The tension in his shoulders eased by degrees, muscle by muscle. Finally, he said, Leon will handle it. Good, I said. Let him. He leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, eyes on the screen where the revised accords glowed steady and clean again. You know what I hate most? Being wrong? Being predictable. I almost smiled. You're not predictable. You're consistent. That's rarer. He made a low sound, half amusement, half surrender. You could have gone to her. Voss. She would have paid triple your salary. Why stay? Because she doesn't build things, I said. She conquers them. And me? You build, I said. Even when you pretend you're burning. He looked at me then, properly looked. Tired, stripped of the armor he wore so easily. For a second, the glass walls reflected us both in equal weight, no crown between. I didn't thank you for the leak, he said. You did, I said. You just didn't like how it sounded. The corner of his mouth twitched. He rubbed a hand over his face, the motion oddly human. You should sleep. So should you. I can't. Then we'll call it a draw, I said. He laughed softly, and it startled us both. You're impossible, he said again. I'm consistent, I repeated. The room softened. The servers dimmed. For the first time in days, the silence wasn't hostile. It was tired, alive, honest. He straightened. Tomorrow, when we sign, it ends. No, I said, watching the monitors fade to standby. Tomorrow, it begins. He studied me for a long beat, then nodded once, the gesture almost gentle. Go home, Raiden. I hesitated. If you go hunting tonight. I won't, he said. You were right. About what? About strength. He turned toward the window, the city's pulse glinting across the glass. I watched his reflection instead of his face, because reflections lie less. He looked like a man learning how not to break. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of the cracks anymore. The conference hall shimmered with camera flashes before the event even began. The air was charged, half anticipation, half threat. Rows of diplomats, investors, journalists, and were representatives filled the space, all waiting for the final signing of the Human War Accords. Above them, the Harrow Industries insignia glowed in silver across a screen. Balance, consent, coexistence. Colt stood at the podium beside me, the picture of control, black suit, no tie, sleeves, buttoned with the precision of a man who measured everything, including his heartbeat. I stood to his right, one step forward, one step visible. It wasn't planned. I didn't ask permission. The press feeds were live. Thousands of eyes waited for any misstep. Mara Voss didn't wait long. From the audience section, she rose like a headline given flesh. Red lips, tailored. White suit, the confidence of someone who owned too many boardrooms to count. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried clean and sharp across the room. Before you finalize this performance, she began, smiling for the cameras, I have a question for Mr. Harrow. Does equality still count as progress when your chief negotiator is your pet? Gasps erupted like shutters. Colt's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Every instinct in him screamed for silence. Wait, measure, retaliate later. But the crowd didn't wait. The word pet spread like oil on water. I moved before he could. Funny, I said, stepping toward the microphone. You call it a performance. Yet you rehearsed your line. Mara's eyes glittered. Oh, darling, no rehearsal needed. The world can see what this is. A leash with better par. I smiled the way I do when I'm about to dismantle someone politely. You mistake the collar for the contract. One is ownership, the other is choice. Choice? She echoed. You think you're free while standing next to him? I didn't flinch. Freedom isn't measured by distance from power. It's measured by the terms we write together. She tilted her head, feigning pity. Tell me, Raiden, what happens when the leash tugs? Do you still believe in terms? The crowd murmured. Someone's camera flash went off like lightning. I let the silence breathe, then said clearly, a mark is not a chain. It's an agreement. A bond is not control, it's consent. And consent, I paused, is the first law of any civilization worth saving. The room went still. Every camera turned to me. Every headline rewrote itself. Behind me, Colt exhaled once, a small, steadying sound. Then he stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. The Accords, he said, his voice cool as tempered steel, will be governed by a new framework. The code of ethics, developed by my representative, Mr. Winters, ensures that no individual, alpha or omega, can be coerced, marked, or bound without documented consent. Ever. He gestured toward the screen behind us. My document filled it, the ethical code of the Accords, signed by both species. Councils, its clauses glimmering in white text across the dark background. Mara's smile faltered. Effective immediately, Colt continued. Every company, every pack, every government body adhering to the Accords will operate under these terms. I stepped beside him and spoke into the mic. This isn't about taming alphas or freeing omegas. It's about defining respect as a shared language. The applause began hesitantly, then built, rising like a wave. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions that blurred into static. Mara stayed standing, but her face no longer played for the cameras. She looked at Colt, then at me, and saw that she had lost. Not to dominance, but to reason. Colt took the pen from the podium, signed the official copy of the Accords, then, without hesitation, turned the document toward me. Every flashbulb in the room froze in that instant. He held the pen out. You signed too. It wasn't in the protocol. Assistants didn't co-sign peace between nations. I looked at him. He didn't blink. There was no smirk, no power play, just an invitation, equal. I took the pen. The metal was warm from his hand. The cameras clicked like heartbeats as I signed my name beside his. Colt Harrow, Raiden Winters, not owner and property, not alpha and subordinate. 2 signatures under one law. The applause this time was deafening. The hall stood. The press feeds went wild. Across the front row, I caught Ella's grin and Leon's rare nod of approval. Mara's seat was empty when I glanced back again. Colt turned slightly toward me, his voice barely audible under the roar of the crowd. You didn't have to do that. I did, I said. Otherwise they'd still think I needed permission. His eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen before. You've rewritten more than the Accords today. Good, I said. It's about time someone did. Reporters shouted for statements. Someone yelled, Are you confirming a bond between you two? Laughter rippled through the room. Colt leaned toward the microphone. No bond, he said evenly. Just an agreement. Then he glanced sideways at me. A rather strong one. The crowd roared again. In the chaos, our reflections met on the mirrored wall behind the podium. 2 silhouettes, different shapes, same stance. For a moment, under the floodlights and noise, I let myself breathe. The mark the world had waited for wasn't on my skin. It was in ink. It was visible to everyone, and owned by no one. As the cameras flashed one final time, Colt leaned closer, his words for me alone. You realize, he murmured, you just made yourself untouchable. Good, I whispered back. Now you can stop trying to protect me. He smiled, the faintest edge of pride breaking through the exhaustion. That was never protection. That was admiration I didn't have the vocabulary for. And for once, I didn't have an answer. The crowd kept cheering, the lights kept burning, and between us, just for that heartbeat, everything was equal. Not master and servant, not predator and prey. Just two men standing in the glare of a new world they'd built together. The hall was unrecognizable without the noise. Hours ago, it had been a sea of lights, applause, and camera flashes. Now it was just a room with echoes. The banners still hung, but the air had changed. Outside, rain slid down the glass like melted applause, blurring the skyline into watercolor. I sat on the edge of the podium, jacket off, tie loose, the world finally still enough to breathe. The city lights reflected through the windows, fractured by water, painting shifting gold on the floor. Footsteps broke the quiet, slow, deliberate. I didn't need to turn. Colt stopped a few feet behind me, the sound of the rain catching between us. He wasn't wearing the armor of his role anymore. No tie, no perfect composure. Just a man standing in a storm he'd survived. "They've all gone home," he said. "I noticed. You should too." "I will," I said, but didn't move. He came closer until his reflection overlapped mine in the window, two silhouettes framed in fractured city light. "You handled them well." "Which part? The journalists or the world?" "All of it." He paused. "You didn't just change the narrative, Raiden. You changed the foundation." I smiled faintly. "Try putting that in the quarterly report." His reflection looked down, then at me. "You could leave now," he said quietly. "You've earned that." "But," he hesitated, the word, but hanging heavy in the air. "But you won't ask me to," I said. He exhaled, shoulders lowering. "No," he said. "I'll ask you to stay." That caught me off guard. I turned to face him. His eyes, usually sharp enough to cut glass, were softer now, almost uncertain. "Stay," he said again, voice low. "Not because of the accords, not because I need a negotiator. Stay with me." It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a request shaped like one. It was the closest he'd ever come to vulnerability, and it disarmed me more than any threat could have. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then I reached into my pocket and set a small glass vial on the table between us. A drop of amber oil glowed inside, a rare scent I kept but never used. It caught the light, warm and deliberate. "My terms," I said. "My choice. If I stay, it's because I want to. No contracts, no chains." His gaze dropped to the vial, then rose to meet mine. "Understood." I stepped closer until there was only a breath between us. "And one more thing," I added. "You stop calling the shots outside the boardroom." His mouth twitched, just enough to count as a smile. "Then who does?" "I do," I said. "Schedule, meetings, coffee, everything." "Everything? Don't push your luck." He leaned in then, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. The kiss wasn't a claim, it was a quiet recognition. Two people finally breathing in the same language. No mark, no command, no power, just balance. When we parted, I was the first to speak. "All right, Your Majesty," I said softly, "but the schedule is mine." He laughed, an actual laugh this time, tired and bright. "Fine," he said. "Just make sure I'm on it." I turned back to the window. The rain was easing, the light steady again. Behind me, Colt stood close enough that his warmth bled through the quiet. For the first time in months, there was no storm, just the slow, deliberate peace of two people who'd finally stopped pretending to be at war. Morning sunlight slid down the glass towers like honey, settling warm and bright across Colt Harrow's office. The world outside was still talking, news anchors, investors, entire message boards buzzing. But up here, it was quiet. Colt sat behind his desk, pretending to read a financial report he'd already finished twice. He didn't look up when I came in, though the corner of his mouth betrayed him. "You're early," he said. "You're predictable," I replied, setting 2 cups of coffee on the desk. His was black, mine carried a small swirl of foam shaped, more or less, like a crown. From the doorway, Ella leaned in, tablet in hand, eyes glinting with amusement. Leon followed her, coffee already in his grip, watching us with the look of a man who had seen every form of disaster and was still deciding whether this counted as one. "So," Ella said, tilting the tablet toward me, "you've seen this morning's headline?" Across the screen blazed, "Harrow. Harrow appoints Omega as co-executive representative." A smaller subline read, "A historic shift in leadership ethics." Colt didn't react, but I caught the brief flicker of pride behind his calm. Leon whistled low. "So this is diplomacy," he said. "All that talk about coexistence was just foreplay for a merger." Ella grinned. "Remind me to buy the world's tiniest tiara for Raiden here." I took a sip of my coffee. "No need. I already have one." I lifted my cup, showing the crown of milk foam wobbling at the surface. "See? Sometimes the best crowns are made of coffee." Colt's laugh was quiet, but real. "Remind me who's in charge of scheduling." "I am," I said, settling across from him. The office hummed with quiet routine, sunlight spilling through the glass, the air rich with caffeine, and something gentler. Peace, maybe. Outside, the world kept turning, but inside, everything had found its balance. And for once, that was enough.